Have you forgotten that you're living here rent-free thanks to your husband's generosity? My sister-in-law's words stung as she moved in, freshly divorced and demanding to see her room. I don't need your input, just show me where I'll be staying, she retorted, bristling with newfound independence under our roof. My husband inviting her here. What a reckless decision. This self-centered duo will pay for this, I seethed, plotting my retaliation. My name is Sophia. Since marrying Sam, an engineer who can work from home, we settled in a small town near my childhood home. Country life has its challenges, but the community is kind and the surroundings are peaceful. Sam, originally from the city, seemed to embrace rural living. The locals are so warm-hearted, it warms my soul to hear Sam say that. Sam travels to New York City's headquarters once a month, visiting his family and updating them on our lives. My parents own a large estate in town where my brother, his wife, and my parents reside. They're all wonderful, down-to-earth country folk who often lend a hand with food and support, I explained. Though Sam and I hadn't started our own family yet, watching my brother's bustling household made us eager to do so. However, it seemed parenthood would have to wait a bit longer for us. While Sam and I enjoyed a peaceful life together, one point of contention was our differing views on starting a family. I'm not quite ready, Sam would say, tempering my desire for children. But for me, the urge to become a mother grew stronger each day. We married later in life, and while Sam was content to wait, I felt the pressure of time as a woman. Sam, I really want us to start a family soon, I plead, only to hear his familiar response. Work is demanding right now, let's wait a little longer. When exactly is a bit more, I pressed Sam with a hint of frustration, but his response was evasive. I'll bring it up when the time is right, just leave it be, he retorted. His demeanor towards me grew distant, possibly due to work stress. Fine, was all I managed to utter. As time passed, our relationship suffered, and a year slipped by. Then one day, Sam abruptly announced, my sister is getting divorced. I recalled that she had been married for about 2 years and lived in New York City, but Sam's casual mention left me puzzled. That's why she's moving in with us, he explained matter-of-factly. Initially bewildered, I asked, wait, what do you mean? Sam clarified, my sister is getting divorced, so she's coming to stay with us. She'll be here next week. It became clear that decisions had been made without my input. You can't just decide things like this, I protested, but Sam remained firm. She's family, practically your family too. I expected you to understand. You're being colder than I thought. His words stung as he criticized me. Why are you so defensive? It's not right to decide things unilaterally, I argued, but Sam's expression hardened in response. In the early days of our marriage, Sam wasn't as arrogant. Perhaps the leisurely countryside life and adoration from locals had changed him. I noticed the shift subtly, but confronting him directly seemed daunting. Yeah, I never anticipated his growing self-centeredness. I can't live with your sister. Please ask her to reconsider, I asserted firmly before retreating to our room. Sam's response was abrupt and forceful. Don't you dare say you can't live with my sister. I won't hear it. He seized my arm, his voice raised. Truthfully, I never cared much for his sister Emily. She hailed from the city, embodying the stereotype of a condescending urbanite. Her husband's corporate status only seemed to bolster her arrogance. Well, Sophia dear, it's been a while. How's life in your quaint countryside? We seldom crossed paths, but when we did, her disdain for my rural life was always evident. Emily always made a point of boasting about her husband. My husband is a top executive at a major corporation. You two are lucky to lead such a laid-back life in the countryside, she remarked with a sarcastic tone. Refusing to be intimidated, I replied, yes, thanks to you, we're savoring every moment. Emily, always eager to outdo others, took offense. Well, it's easy to get by with less in the countryside. Living in the city like us, it's a different story, she snapped. I wanted to retort immediately but kept my composure. I suppose we've each learned something valuable, I remarked calmly. Yet the satisfaction of country living differs greatly from city life. Emily was momentarily speechless but quickly fired back. Enjoy your frugal existence then. Her demeanor left me bewildered. I had never encountered someone quite like her. If I had to live with her, it would be unbearable. I was determined to prevent it, but despite my efforts to persuade Sam, he remained stubborn. Just 2 days before Emily was set to move in, I received a call from her. Expecting her usual rudeness, I answered hesitantly, hello. Emily sounded irritated at my tone. What's with the attitude? It's rather rude, especially when I've taken the effort to call you. Emily was as irritable as I had anticipated. So, Sam told you I'm moving in, right? You better take good care of me. It shouldn't be hard for you, since you've been lounging around all this time. I'll be disappointed if you don't listen, she chided. Her relentless chatter and entitled attitude didn't sit well, considering she was about to rely on others. Emily, I heard about your divorce and your plan to stay here, I remarked with a touch of sarcasm, but Emily remained unfazed. Yeah, so what? People split up all the time, don't they? I got tired of city life, so I thought I'd try the countryside for a change. Any objections? She shot back, her tone aggressive. Well, I didn't give you permission to move into our house, I asserted firmly, but Emily chuckled on the other end of the line. Why would you have a say? This is Sam's house, isn't it? You do realize he's the one paying the bills, she retorted, revealing her misconception about the ownership of our home. On the agreed-upon day, Emily arrived at our doorstep as promised. Here I am, she declared with an air of entitlement, briskly unloading her luggage upon entering. Sophia, snap out of it and show me where I'll be staying. My sister-in-law exuded self-importance and arrogance. It baffled me how she managed to hold a job with such an attitude. To my frustration, Emily had higher academic credentials than me and had worked at a major corporation. Although she quit after marriage, she still received job offers from various companies, confident she could return to work anytime. I apologized for the inconvenience, I said calmly. Let me show you to your room, Sam interjected impatiently. All right, no need to rush. Your bags must be heavy. Feel free to head to the living room first, I added, gesturing for Sam and Emily to precede me. After suggesting tea, Emily appeared to accept my hospitality and followed me into the room. As I served them tea, I broached the main topic. Emily, I understand it's been a long journey, but you can't stay here, I began. What do you mean, Sophia? Emily dismissed my statement. This is Sam's house, isn't it? He's the one paying the rent. Have you forgotten? Sam quickly chimed in, echoing her sentiment. Exactly. You don't have a say in this. It's my house. Despite their confidence, I knew they were unaware of a crucial detail. Actually, I inherited this house from my parents, I revealed. Their expressions shifted instantly, but Emily was quick to rebut. Oh, Sophia, you don't have to fabricate stories just because you don't want me here, she countered, clearly skeptical. I'm not fabricating anything, I responded calmly. How can I believe that you inherited this house from your parents when I'm the one who's been paying rent? I won't let you get away with such lies, Sam exclaimed, packing up with disbelief. Emily joined in, pressing me as well, but I remained composed, anticipating their reaction. Could you both just listen for a moment? I interjected, trying to calm the escalating tension. Sam, you haven't been paying rent. What you've been giving me each month is simply for living expenses, I clarified, hoping he would understand. What? That can't be right, Sam replied, struggling to comprehend my words. The truth is, Sam, you haven't been paying rent because there isn't any. My parents gifted us this house and the land it sits on, I explained patiently, expecting shock and confusion. Sam began to panic. Wait, I've been giving you $1,000 a month. Why would it cost so much to live in this remote countryside? Just because we live in the countryside doesn't mean there aren't expenses, I countered gently. We've managed to get by on that amount because we don't have to pay rent. I sighed heavily, and Sam's frustration boiled over. You should have told me earlier. There's no reason for you to deny Emily a place to stay, he argued stubbornly. It's pointless. I have to show you the documents, I said firmly. Look at this. The owner of this house is me. Did you even bother to check whose name the house is under before assuming the money you gave me each month included rent? My assertive tone left Sam speechless. But how? The documents clearly showed my name as the owner. It's time to ask your sister to leave. Emily, however, fired back immediately. What are you talking about? I don't care if you inherited this house. I'm family too, you know. I've never met someone as heartless as you. I watched Emily rattle on with a cold gaze before speaking up. When have I ever considered you family, Emily? You've always belittled me, called me a hick, and accused me of being too dependent on Sam. You've never shown an ounce of gratitude for staying here. Did you really think I'd want someone like you in my house? I let out all my pent-up frustration at her. Emily finally seemed to grasp her place. Turning to Sam, I emphasized, Sam, You do understand that this house belongs to me, right? Sam's anger flared at this revelation. This isn't fair. You should have told us this before Emily moved in. Why are you bringing this up now? You both make decisions without consulting me, so I did the same. Any issues with that? Dealing with this self-centered sibling duo required hitting them with reality. Emily appeared particularly flustered by my revelations. Sam, what are we going to do? I'll be left homeless at this rate, I exclaimed in frustration. It seems Emily hasn't left her previous residence in New York since the divorce, Sam admitted reluctantly. Why don't you go to your parents' place? I suggested, hoping for a simple solution, but it turned out they had their own reasons. My parents are moving into a retirement home, and they've sold their family home, Sam explained. Emily wanted to move in with me, but I can't allow that. That's not my problem. If you want Emily to stay, you should leave, I insisted firmly. This is my house. Sam looked down helplessly as Emily continued to berate him. If I get kicked out, it's your fault for not sorting things out, she yelled angrily. I'll have nowhere to go, so just shut up. Sam finally snapped back at Emily, and they began arguing fiercely. Dealing with them was proving to be quite a headache. Could you both lower your voices? You're disturbing the neighbors, I urged firmly, signaling for them to leave. Sam hesitated, pleading, Sophia, I understand. I'll ask Emily to leave. Just let me stay. What? Hold on, Sam. What are you saying? Emily protested, caught off guard. Ignoring her protests, Sam firmly escorted her out. Now on his knees, Sam pleaded with me, but I looked down at him with resolve. Do you think begging will make me forgive you? I'm sorry, but I have no intention of forgiving you. My frustration with Sam went beyond Emily's presence. You've never truly been present for me, have you? I confronted him. Sam avoided my gaze. You're always busy with work. You never make time for us to talk. I can't continue this marriage. With that, I handed Sam the signed divorce papers. Please just give me time to reconsider, Sam pleaded desperately, unwilling to lose his life with me. But I was resolute. Just leave, I said coldly. You've got to be kidding me. Just because this is your house doesn't give you the right to do whatever you want, Sam retorted, frustrated. I couldn't bear to hear Sam defend Emily staying without my consent. Please don't act like you're any better, I retorted sharply before leaving him with those words and returning to my room, leaving the divorce papers on the table. After that, Sam and I proceeded with our divorce. According to a mutual acquaintance, Sam and Emily returned to New York, facing difficulties. Well, it seems karma is catching up with them for their self-centeredness. I hope they learn from their hardships, I reflected. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying a fulfilling life here in my rural home. As Mary, nearing her late 50s, reflects on her life, she finds herself at a turning point. With her 2 children, one on the brink of marriage and the other thriving in college, she senses her motherly duties waning. As a former nurse, she contemplates a return to caregiving, feeling the pull of her profession once more. However, life throws her a curveball when she receives distressing news. Her father-in-law, Bob, has suffered a stroke. Rushing to the hospital at her husband John's urgent call, Mary's thoughts swirl with concern. Bob, always a pillar of kindness and warmth, has been grappling with the loss of his wife, Alice, for the past 3 years. Despite Mary's efforts to uplift his spirits through family gatherings and outings, she's noticed a gradual decline in Bob's energy. Just as she begins to see glimmers of his old vitality returning, the news of his stroke hits her like a thunderbolt. Arriving at the hospital, she finds Bob's daughter and son-in-law engaged in conversation, a mix of emotions swirling within her. Apologies for my tardiness. How's Bob holding up? I gasped out, hurting to catch up with John's sister, Isabella. Her response was a sigh of irritation as she glanced my way. Clearly annoyed. You're late. We're in a hurry. Can you handle this? With that brisk dismissal, she hurried off, leaving me behind. Isabella's indifference towards Bob was palpable, a demeanor she carried even when Alice, Bob's late wife, was alive. Despite Bob and Alice's unwavering kindness, Isabella remained aloof, untouched by their warmth. Left alone in the waiting area, I paced nervously, my thoughts consumed by Bob's condition. Meanwhile, John rushed in, his concern evident in the beads of sweat on his forehead and his soaked dress shirt. "Mary, how's Dad?" he asked anxiously. I shook my head, indicating I had no updates yet. John's reaction was visceral. He dropped the bags he was carrying, his complexion draining of color. No, that's not what I meant, I reassured him quickly. He's still in surgery. We're waiting for news. Relief washed over John, evident in the way he retrieved his fallen bags and slumped into a nearby chair. Should we brace ourselves? I hurried over to John, who teetered on the edge of tears, and placed a comforting hand on his back. It'll be all right, I murmured, feeling utterly helpless with no words substantial enough to offer solace. Hours ticked by before the surgery's conclusion, and we were ushered into a small room by the doctor for an update. The surgery went well, but there may be lasting effects, the doctor explained gently, indicating that Bob would require ongoing care. While our hearts hoped for Bob's swift recovery, the reality of caregiving loomed, a responsibility that would involve Isabella and her husband. John and I decided to reach out to Isabella to discuss the next steps. After a conversation, we agreed to convene at Bob's home, a gathering necessitated by the circumstances while Bob remained hospitalized. I won't be his caregiver, Isabella declared bluntly, sending shockwaves through John and me. But what are we supposed to do then? I countered, baffled by her indifference. Isabella, nonchalant, continued toying with her meticulously manicured nails, a stark contrast to the gravity of the conversation. Her husband, Tom, simply nodded along. What about a nursing home? I suggested, met with Isabella's vehement refusal. I'm not wasting money on that. This is what happens whenever I get involved, she snapped, shooting me a venomous glare. It's like my opinion doesn't matter, so I keep quiet. If he can't go to a facility and neither of you will care for him, what's the plan? John pressed, frustration seeping into his voice. That's why you should handle it. I don't want some burden in my home, Isabella chuckled callously, pushing me to my breaking point. Enough, he's your father, for heaven's sake. I snapped, my patience wearing thin. I don't care. Why am I expected to bear the responsibility just because he's my father? He's John's father too. I've been saying you two should handle it. I don't have a response to that. We'd love to care for him at home, but our house isn't equipped for it, I explained, feeling the weight of reality pressing down. There are too many obstacles, stairs, uneven floors, to bring my father-in-law here. We need significant renovations and we simply can't afford it. Mary, you're trained in caregiving, aren't you? It shouldn't be a big deal, Isabella remarked smugly, her tone grating on my nerves. John shared my frustration, and we silently agreed to table the discussion for now, retreating from his parents' home. What's our next move, Mary? You mentioned considering a return to caregiving, John inquired, his concern evident. It's not just about the job. We'd have to make this place safe for Dad, and that's a financial challenge, I replied, trying to reassure him. You're right, John conceded, acknowledging the daunting road ahead. I estimate it could cost around $100,000. That's just a ballpark figure, but considering the modifications needed for the entire first floor to accommodate him, that's roughly what we're looking at. I mused aloud, grappling with the daunting financial reality. With our eldest still in college, we simply don't have that kind of money. We're still paying off the mortgage, and the thought of taking on another loan for renovations is overwhelming. It's a difficult decision, but should we consider a facility for him? The question is, would he even be able to get in? The wait lists are long, and the expense is significant, and I doubt Isabella and her family would offer any assistance. It feels like we're stuck with no viable solution. Deciding to at least listen to my father-in-law's perspective, I made my way alone to the hospital where he was admitted. Stepping into his room, I was greeted by a sight that lifted my spirits. My father-in-law, visibly improved, greeted me with a warm smile. Please don't apologize, my father-in-law would often murmur upon my visits. There's no trouble at all. And look, I've brought you one of your favorite books today. Why apologize? You're bringing me joy, I'd respond, trying to uplift his spirits. The doctor had informed us of his stroke, leaving him unable to move the right half of his body independently. To read, he'd prop the book on the table, using a weight to keep the pages steady. Ah, thank you, my father-in-law replied gratefully, accepting the book I'd brought. I gently placed the book by his pillow. Dad, I came today because I wanted to talk about what lies ahead, I began, meeting his warm smile with a heavy heart. Oh, I understand. I'll be fine, even in a nursing home. I've prepared for it, so please don't worry, he reassured me, though I sensed a flicker of loneliness in his eyes. Well, Dad, if you're open to it, why not come stay with us? I have experience in elderly care, and as a stay-at-home mom, I have the time. John will be there too. Let's live together, I blurted out, sensing his solitude. His surprise was evident, perhaps realizing deep down that returning to his own home, where Isabella and her husband resided, might not be feasible. I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd view him as a burden, ultimately leading to a nursing home. The thought weighed heavily on me, overshadowing my initial intention to listen to my father-in-law's wishes. There was a twinge of guilt toward my husband John, but I knew he'd understand. Now, we needed to arrange for his care upon discharge. Money was a concern, so I decided to seek Isabella's input. With these thoughts swirling in my mind, I made my way home. When John returned from work, I recounted the events at the hospital. He appeared troubled but nodded, almost as if he had anticipated this turn of events. Without delay, did John dial Isabella's number. We're reaching out for assistance because we'll be the ones caring for Dad, John explained, his voice tinged with frustration as their conversation escalated. With a resigned sigh, he ended the call and briefed me on their exchange. Isabella refused to contribute any funds. It seems there's little we can do about it, he disclosed, his concern evident as he contemplated the financial implications for his father-in-law. From then on, our home buzzed with activity. We deliberated over renovations, essential care supplies, and received guidance on home care options. When I informed my father-in-law that he'd be moving in with us upon discharge, his expression was a mix of gratitude and regret. "Mary, could you fetch the checkbook from over there?" he requested, gesturing toward a cloth bag on the shelf. Curious as to why he'd need it, I obliged, retrieving the checkbook during one of our visits. Observing my father-in-law, I watched as he opened the bank book and presented it to me. "I have some savings here. Could you and John make use of it?" The figure written in the checkbook was staggering, surpassing any amount I'd ever seen. Stunned, I must have appeared frozen, prompting my father-in-law to chuckle. "You and John will be looking after me now, won't you? I heard about the new car, the renovations to make the house accessible. Would $10 million cover it? $10 million. The zeros overwhelmed me, leaving me speechless. I couldn't fathom why my father-in-law had amassed such a fortune, but it seemed that after my mother-in-law's passing, he had turned to investments he had been studying, and they had proven lucrative. His savings had grown exponentially, fueled by his restrained spending habits. Yet even if he intended to renovate the house or purchase a car, the sum seemed excessive. Reluctantly, I returned the bank book, shaking my head. "I can't accept this much. Please keep it for yourself." He pushed the book back toward me, insisting, "I can't possibly use all of this. I'd rather return it to you and your family, who are willing to care for me." Once again faced with the returned bank book, I stood my ground. "I really can't accept such a large sum," I insisted firmly. After a brief pause, my father-in-law proposed, "How about $1 million?" Realizing the impasse, I managed to negotiate a compromise, settling on a reduced amount of $100,000. Though he seemed reluctant, he agreed, and for the time being, that seemed satisfactory. As we were in the midst of this exchange, Isabella suddenly appeared, catching us off guard. Quickly, I stashed the bank book back in its place. Seeing my hurried actions, Isabella's brow furrowed in concern. "What's going on?" she inquired, her voice tinged with worry. I breathed a sigh of relief, grateful she hadn't overheard our previous conversation. Isabella had come to deliver some clothes for our father. After a brief exchange, we left the hospital room together. However, on our way home, Isabella suggested stopping by a coffee shop for a discussion. Given her history of bringing up unpleasant topics, I braced myself for what was to come. Reluctantly, I acquiesced, unaware of the twist awaiting us. "I'll take care of Dad," Isabella declared out of the blue, stunning me. Her sudden proposition caught me off guard, especially since we were already knee-deep in preparations to accommodate my father-in-law, including ongoing renovations to our home. I couldn't fathom why she would make such a proposal at this stage. "So you won't need to visit the hospital anymore," she added. "Visiting isn't solely the responsibility of the caregiver. There's no rule dictating that only the caretaker should visit." Why would she say that? I pondered, feeling perplexed by Isabella's unexpected offer. Despite my reservations, I suggested we postpone discussing it further and made my exit from the cafe. Back at home, I shared the encounter with John, who mulled over it before a realization dawned on him. "She must have caught wind of the savings," he concluded. "It seems that's the case," he added. "Otherwise, she wouldn't have volunteered for the caretaking role, especially given her previous reluctance." I harbored a vague suspicion that Isabella had somehow discovered the extent of my father-in-law's savings and was angling to secure a share of it for herself. Perhaps she would concoct a reason to start dipping into the funds. But what do we do about it? I queried, feeling a sense of unease. I got an idea. Let's give her a chance, John suggested with a mischievous grin, hinting at a plan brewing in his mind. Uneasy about his scheme, I opted to stay silent and play along with Isabella's request for the time being. I assured my father-in-law that financial concerns were no longer an issue and that Isabella would be providing care. His response was vague, his expression neither confirming nor denying his comprehension. With that, the conversation concluded. Following his discharge from the hospital, my father-in-law returned to the family home in Nebraska, where Isabella resided. During a visit to the house, I couldn't discern any signs of renovation or adequate caregiving supplies. I questioned whether genuine caregiving could take place under such circumstances. However, it was Isabella's decision, and I felt it wasn't my place to intervene, so I remained silent. 2 months later, I received a frantic call from Isabella. "Mary, I can't do this anymore. Please come over right now," she pleaded urgently. Concerned, I wasted no time and rushed to the house in Nebraska. Upon my arrival, I was greeted by a disarrayed house and a foul odor lingering in the air. Puzzled by the scene before me, Isabella emerged, looking more worn out than ever. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her movements were unsteady. "Are you all right?" I asked, rushing to her side, alarmed by her condition. Isabella grasped my hand tightly and muttered, "Get rid of that." Confused at first, I managed to calm her down and coax an explanation out of her. It appeared that she had underestimated the demands of caregiving. From assisting with mobility and meals to managing incontinence, including dealing with diapers, the responsibilities had overwhelmed her. She felt incapable of managing anything, not even attending to her own needs. I reassured her that I couldn't make any immediate decisions but promised to reach out as soon as possible. With a heavy heart, I carried this burden home with me. "It's been 2 months already." "Impressive," John remarked, glancing at the calendar. It seemed he had anticipated this turn of events. He suggested we pick up my father-in-law on his next day off, and I readily agreed. A few days later, as we arrived at the family home in Nebraska, my father-in-law was already packed and prepared to depart. Relief washed over me knowing we could finally bring him home. Just because I endured for 2 months and used to live here doesn't mean I don't deserve compensation. "I think $5 million sounds fair," Isabella declared suddenly as we were assisting my father-in-law into the car. I froze in disbelief. John, too, was taken aback, turning to face Isabella with a mixture of surprise and dismay. But she remained unfazed, sporting a smug expression. "Isabella, what on earth are you talking about? This isn't the time or place to discuss money, especially not in front of Dad. Remember, he raised us," John reasoned, attempting to appeal to her sense of decency, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. "I'm his daughter. It's only fair that I get compensated," Isabella retorted defiantly, her audacity catching me off guard. How could she be so brazen? Appalled by Isabella's attitude, I couldn't hold back. "Isabella, discussing money in this manner is completely inappropriate. Besides, you've already received funds," I interjected, my father-in-law echoing my sentiment with a disbelieving expression. "That's all gone now. Just $5 million. What's the harm in that? If you're just going to squander it away, you might as well put it to good use, sis." Isabella's callous words towards her own father left me speechless. Even my typically composed husband John was visibly enraged, his face flushing red with anger as he glared at his sister. "John, it's all right. She's stating the truth." Bob, my father-in-law, attempted to calm his incensed son. Then, turning to Isabella with a stern demeanor, he delivered his verdict. "Isabella, you are no longer welcome in this house. Leave immediately." His tone was cold and final. Stunned by his words, Isabella stood frozen in shock. What are you saying?" "I'm your daughter, Dad," Isabella exclaimed in disbelief. "I have only one child, my son, and this woman beside me, Mary, is my daughter-in-law. I no longer recognize you. Leave with your foolish husband." Bob, my father-in-law, responded with a sternness that startled me. I had only known him to be gentle and soft-spoken, but now his eyes were steely, commanding no opposition. Even Isabella seemed subdued by his authority. "Shall we depart then? We're relying on you moving forward," Bob continued, his demeanor shifting back to its usual warmth as he addressed me. With no other recourse, John and I complied with his directive. As we drove away, leaving Isabella behind in stunned silence, it felt surreal. Later, we learned that Bob had arranged with his lawyer to draft a last will and testament, ensuring that the inheritance would solely benefit John and guaranteeing that Isabella would not receive any portion of it. With Isabella gone, the house stood vacant and John and I expressed our desire to reside there. Bob gladly agreed. Isabella and her husband relocated to an apartment, but it became evident they had been tapping into Bob's finances even when he was in good health. Their extravagant spending habits landed them in debt, and now they struggle to settle it. Each day, I can't shake the feeling that this downfall was bound to happen for someone like Isabella, who lacks respect and gratitude towards her parent, regardless of biological ties. While tending to Bob's needs presents its challenges, my background in caregiving allows me to handle it without feeling burdened, and I